In a peaceful village, a young boy named Arav had big dreams. He was intelligent and hardworking, but his greatest struggle was his restless mind. No matter what he did, studying, working, or even speaking to someone, his thoughts drifted into endless fantasies, worries, and overthinking. His parents and teachers often reminded him to focus, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't control his wandering thoughts. One day, during an important school exam, Arav faced his worst nightmare. Though he had studied everything, his mind went blank. His thoughts jumped from past regrets to imaginary stories instead of the questions in front of him. When the results came, he had failed 2 subjects. His teachers were disappointed, his friends felt sorry for him, and his parents were deeply worried. That night, sitting alone in his room, Arav felt utterly helpless. He knew he had the potential to succeed, but his thoughts controlled him instead of the other way around. Seeing his grandson's distress, Arav's grandfather, a wise and kind man, sat beside him and asked, "What's wrong?" With tears in his eyes, Arav replied, "Grandfather, no matter how hard I try, my mind keeps running in all directions. I want to focus, but wasteful thoughts don't let me." His grandfather smiled and said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led Arav to the backyard, where an empty clay pot sat. Handing him a cup of dirty water, he said, "Pour this into the pot." Arav did as he was told. Then his grandfather handed him a jug of clean water. "Now keep pouring this until the dirty water is gone." Arav slowly poured, watching as the murky water overflowed and was gradually replaced with clear, fresh water. His grandfather then said, "Your mind is like this pot. If you keep filling it with wasteful thoughts, it will become polluted. But if you replace them with good and meaningful thoughts, the wasteful ones will disappear." Arav thought for a moment and asked, "But how do I replace my wasteful thoughts with good ones?" His grandfather smiled and said, "Let me tell you a story. Long ago, in a mighty kingdom, there was a young warrior named Kian. He was strong and talented, but he had one major flaw. He doubted himself too much. Before every battle, he would think, "What if I lose? What if my opponent is stronger? What if people laugh at me?" These thoughts consumed him, making him hesitate. He lost small battles, avoided challenges, and slowly his confidence faded. One day, an old monk saw Kian sitting alone, lost in his worries. The monk approached him and handed him a cup of water. He then gave him a pinch of salt and said, "Drop this salt into the cup and drink." Kian did as he was told, but immediately spat it out. It was too salty. The monk then took him to a vast lake and told him to drop the same amount of salt into the water. "Now, take a sip," he said. This time the water tasted fresh. The monk smiled and said, "The amount of salt was the same, but the difference was the size of the container. If your mind is small, even a little negativity will overwhelm it. But if you make your mind vast like this lake, no negativity will affect you." Hearing this, Kian understood. He stopped focusing on his doubts and filled his mind with courage. He trained with full dedication and soon became one of the greatest warriors of the kingdom. Arav was deep in thought. He finally realized what he had been doing wrong. "I keep my mind small, and that's why wasteful thoughts take over so easily. But if I start filling my mind with focus, discipline, and positive thoughts, the wasteful ones will have no space to stay." His grandfather nodded. "Exactly. The mind is a powerful tool. If you don't control it, it will control you. But if you train it with the right thoughts, it will become your greatest strength." That night, Arav made a decision. He would no longer let wasteful thoughts rule his mind. He started following a strict routine, practiced mindfulness, and trained himself to stay present. Whenever a wasteful thought entered his mind, he replaced it with a productive one. Slowly, his focus improved. His studies became better. his confidence grew. And in the next exams, he scored the highest in his class. Years later, Arav became a renowned scientist, inspiring many to train their minds. Whenever people asked him how he overcame wasteful thoughts, he would smile and say, "Your mind is like a pot. Fill it with good thoughts, and there will be no space for wasteful ones. The mind is like water. It takes the shape of whatever we fill it with. If we allow wasteful thoughts, they will take over. But if we fill it with focus, positivity, and discipline, success will naturally follow."